Hi everyone, and welcome to part 6 of our teacher series on how to become an amazing teacher of debating or how to run an amazing debate club. Now, today we're talking about the move from teacher to coach. And what I mean by this, these are just ease of talking words, is that a debate teacher is someone that I would think of as someone who might run practice debates at lunchtime, do a lot of admin work, as in signing their kids up for competitions and filling out all the parental consent forms, accompanying their students to competitions, and generally being responsible for the wider oracy projects within their school. But a coach is someone who I would think of as actually capable of running debate training or debate classes. Someone who could have an hour class with their students after school and be like, okay, today we're going to go through the theory of how to win from first prop or how to frame debates effectively. Now, the first, being a debate teacher, often requires that you are a teacher in the school and that you have lots of generally good abilities with students, but it doesn't require you to have a lot of debate knowledge. And indeed, if you've watched the first few videos in this series, you should be able to be a debate teacher already. The second part, being a debate coach, requires debate knowledge. Now, how much debate knowledge is what we're going to discuss in this video, and how to accumulate more of that debate knowledge and how to become a better and better coach is part of that. But I think the important thing to say is that most schools don't have a teacher and a coach. The high up, like private, very elite, and very good debate schools tend to have that. They tend to have a teacher who's responsible for debating, who's also a full-time teacher, usually of something like English or history, and then they will often hire like a university debater or an organization like ours to come in and do the more sort of hardcore training. But lots of schools, particularly state schools, who can't afford to be paying for a coach, the teachers learn how to be coaches. And that is a very learnable process. It's not that easy, and it does take a couple of years, but it's a very learnable process. And of course, it's an incredibly fun journey, I think, for most teachers, and it's great for your school if you're able to do the coaching as a debate teacher. So what we're going to look at today is, what does debate training look like? Because you might not know. Are you able to do debate training right now with your current level of knowledge? If so, what could you do right now? What can you not do right now? How can you build that knowledge? And then the idea of being a student of the game yourself and how to become a better and better coach and not just remain a teacher of debating who can't really coach, which is where so many teachers end up, and I think it's just a little bit unfortunate. So let's get right into it. So, what does debate training typically look like? Well, next week we're going to look at our next lesson. We're going to look at the 4 different types of lessons and give some suggestions on what types of lessons you can run based on your own knowledge of debating and how far along the path you are. But very quickly, I think that debate training tends to fall into one of these 4 categories. Number 1 is focus practice or drills. So just like in football, when you practice pinging the ball or when you practice working your triangles, you can do focus practice for debating. You can make all the kids come up with as many points as possible in 15 minutes for a given motion, or they have to come up with 10 stakeholders for a given motion and explain how the motion affects each of them. There are analysis chain drills, things like that. Discussions can be quite useful, discussing like a tutorial group at university, discussing motions, discussing concepts, discussing big ideas, discussing first principles. That stuff can be very useful. Theory. This is probably the most difficult one to do if you don't have a lot of debate knowledge, but it's also very useful. This is when I will just come into a class one day and there'll be a very particular aspect of debating that I want to cover. You know, how to do extensions, how to do whip speeches, how to win from OO, how to prep in 15 minutes, how to frame a debate, what is burden pushing, how to effectively context set. Sort of really quite hardcore debate ideas. And the last one, which I think is typically the least useful, is knowledge lessons, which is when you just decide that, okay, your kids are quite good at debating, but they seem to lose motions that involve things like the minimum wage, taxes, um, or anything remotely economic related, and you might just decide, okay, we're going to have a couple of lessons on, the pros and cons of minimum wage, the pros and cons of progressive taxes or higher taxes on the rich, and a basic understanding of how these things affect wider markets or the economy. I tend to find that those things are not as useful as just teaching debate skills, but sometimes they are necessary. So we're going to discuss all of these in a bit more in depth next time, as well as some example lessons for each. But I think with that brief overview of what debate training tends to look like, the question that I want us to get to this week is, how do you know if you can teach these things, if you are ready, if you're experienced enough, and if you think you might not be or you're not sure, what can you do about it? So, can you coach right now? I think you probably already know the answer to this, but let's discuss a few ways you might have an idea on this. One is, do you have a lot of debate knowledge? Were you a debater at university? Were you a debater at school? When students ask you questions about debating, do you feel like you can give really good quality answers, or are you a little bit unsure a lot of the time? Those questions tend to give an answer. All right. If you weren't a competitive debater, if you haven't been involved in competitive debating for more than a few months, if you're unable to answer a lot of questions about debating that your students ask, or if you're not sure of the answers, then yeah, you can't coach debate theory yet. But that doesn't mean you can't run any training sessions or any valuable coaching sessions. It just means there are some things you can do and some things you can't do, and that's totally fine and totally normal. Something you can do, almost as long as you've been running practice debates for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, you kind of know what debating is, and maybe you've been to a competition or two, you are in pole position to start running some basic but very useful training sessions. And as I repeatedly say, the basics are what you want to focus on. I don't care if you can't teach an hour session on framing or something like POIs and the difference or the usefulness of concessionary POIs versus reductio ad absurdum POIs versus rebuttive POIs versus false flag POIs. Like, because most students don't need to know that stuff yet. That's intermediate to advanced stuff. Basic drills are what novices need for a couple of years and what most kids still need. And it's, as I've said many times before, it's a big mistake for coaches to try the advanced stuff with non-advanced kids. And lots of drills are easy. If you imagine, as we've discussed, like drills such as here's a motion, come up with 10 points in 15 minutes. Here's a motion, anticipate what first prop are going to say, and come up with the op responses. Like, these are easy drills. We'll give more examples next week, but they don't require debate knowledge. Debate theory obviously does. We can't, and this is one of the fallacies in some debate coaching resources as well, is a lesson plan that teaches you how to run like a how to first prop lesson plan is disingenuous at best, maybe just dumb, because if you don't know that stuff, then you can't really teach it. So debate theory is going to have to wait until your knowledge of debating is a little bit more in depth, and we're going to discuss how you get there. But some things you can do right from the get-go. Drills, focus practice, and practice debates don't require intense debate knowledge. Making the transition from a debate teacher to debate coach is very doable. You start out knowing full well that you can't give in-depth coaching advice on some of the more difficult aspects of debating, but you can give your kids really useful focus practice And as time goes on, you learn more and more about debating, you learn more and more drills, more and more practice sessions, you find more and more lesson ideas online, and eventually you start to be able to coach more and more things. And if you're willing to embark upon that journey, then within a couple of years, you'll be an excellent debate coach for any reasonable level. So being a student of the game, I think that the by far the most important thing, if you are a teacher who wants to be a competent coach, is the mindset of understanding that you probably don't know that much, and even if you do, there's always a lot more to learn. And this is remains true for everyone. I've been coaching for a decade now, over a decade, and I still learn new things all the time. When discussing with colleagues, when watching other people coach, watching other people judge, watching my students, I'm always learning. So whether or not you did debating at university or you did debating at school or you took part in this debating competition 25 years ago and won it, um, when you get into this world of competitive oracy, it's probably best to assume you know less rather than to assume you know more. As in, if you're going to fault one way, fault on the side of, wow, I really don't know what's going on. Because if you believe that, if you have that mindset of, I've got a lot to learn, you'll be very open and receptive to picking up all sorts from all places. Whereas if you go in with the mindset of, no, I do public speaking as a teacher, I've watched a few TEDx videos, I reckon I've got this. I mean, maybe you do, but in my experience, there's a lot of debate teachers who never become competent coaches and whose students suffer from that. And the reason is because they think they know it all and they just don't. Um, so try to be humble and be willing to be a student of the game. Be willing to, if you have the time and the patience and you want this, be willing to be a student. And what that means, above all else, is ask questions. And that means when you go to competitions, learn from the competitions by listening to the judges, listening to the speakers, listening to the CAs and the conveners, the people doing the briefings, and ask questions of people you meet. Ask other teachers, ask judges, ask CAs, why did you pick this motion? Ask a judge, you said that my students needed to do more original material and extension. Can you give me some drills that I could do with them that would help that? Judges are really helpful at debating competitions because they're usually debate nerds and they love talking about debating with you. Build your network. Talk to these judges, talk to these CAs, talk to these conveners, talk to these teachers in other schools and get to know them and learn from them. Discuss this stuff with them. That is really, really useful. Ask questions. And if all else fails, ask questions online. Go onto YouTube, as you've presumably done, to find this video, or find debate blogs or sites like ours that often have articles, or we're coming out with a book in 2021, so read our book. Find ways of learning and be open to learning from different places and people and resources. Just always be learning about debating. There's lots to learn, and there are lots of people who are very willing to give up their time and to give you advice for free, but you just have to be willing to take it and accept it. And of course, people are going to give you bad advice. There's loads of bad advice out there. There's loads of teachers who think they know what they're doing, but they're clueless. There's loads of people who are trying to make a career of this who really don't know that much about teaching or debating. It's like anything else. If you start lifting weights, it's a really good idea to get a lot of advice. You don't want to injure yourself. But there's a lot of people on YouTube giving out bad advice, but there's a lot of people on YouTube giving out good advice. And you just have to find the right ones. Many experienced debate teachers still can't meaningfully coach. And as we've said before, if that's a conscious choice, then I think it's a totally valid one. But if that's just because they think they can, or they're unwilling to admit stuff they don't know, I think that's a shame. I think that's a waste. So next time we will go through some example lessons. We'll start with sort of lessons we think almost any teacher can run, and go through in a bit more detail the theory of sort of the 4 types of debating lessons that I think of, and then we'll do some coaching hacks. ways to do some good quality coaching with limited knowledge. So thanks so much for watching. I do notice these are getting longer every week. I do apologise for that. If you'd like us to come into your school, if you'd like to talk to us, if you have any questions, you can comment below or give us an email. But for now, keep arguing with your students, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.